Hey YouTube, welcome back to another History Teacher Reacts video with Mr. Terry as I continue my quest on the internet for historical knowledge. Alright, people been wanting more, and it's time. So we're going to check out another video and a history video about the Swedish metal band that does a lot of historical content, Sabaton. And the video we're going to check out today is a lyric video for their song Stalingrad. So obviously must be about the Battle of Stalingrad in World War II, possibly the most, highest casualty, violent battle in not just World War II history, but possibly world history. So definitely something that could, make a video for that. All right, well, we're going to check this out here in just a second. There will be a link to the original video if you want to check that out kind of without commentary, and without my stopping. You might want to do that. And if that's something you like and you like the video, come on back if you feel inclined, and you can check out the reaction on it. All right, so, yeah, let's check this out. All right, we got the World War II characters. We got Stalin and Hitler and Churchill and Roosevelt and de Gaulle and Mussolini and Hirohito. Okay, got the whole gang. Got the whole gang here. Is this actually the album cover though, or is this just what someone made for this video? Alright, let's do this.
Fresh from Moscow, overload I came to comrades' aid. Sitting in despair, almost crushed by the Fuhrer's army.
Isn't hell hot? Not this hell. So yeah, they're sort of the Volga, right, up in to more the heart of Russia. Now, one of the big criticisms people have made of Hitler was diverting to go to south down to Stalingrad when they were basically on their way to Moscow and possibly having success, to go to something that maybe wouldn't have been worth it down south. But I mean, Stalingrad, it's his namesake city, for the enemy, right? And it did have, of course, industrial value, to that as well. But that has been one criticism of why, was it worth it? Was it nearly necessary to go after Stalingrad with the success they had been having thus far? No, grand it would be violent, right? Very explosive, that's for sure. So we're setting it up. Here we go. Would that be a reference to kind of the interreligious stance, sort of, that the Soviet Union had been under? Probably, right?
Every man dies alone, and when your time comes, you will know that it's time. Stalin's fortress will fall.
Well, the city is, right? Gotta have the riffs, right? Metal songs are not allowed to have riffs. I don't think they are, right? Isn't that rule 1? Good. Ooh, change of pace. If I had long hair, I don't really have hair, so I would be... Get some new footage. There won't be much of Stalingrad after this battle. A little bit of movement. Yeah, so like diverting... Stop. Yeah, diverting south, right? Moscow is more... How do I figure this out? Okay. More northeast, right? North from Stalingrad, and diverting troops to the south was what to go towards Stalingrad, towards the Volga River, was something that people were possibly questioning, right? When Moscow seems to be the more important target. Right, the big thing, right, was the winter. Winter was settling in, and the thought, of course, is that the Germans were not well equipped to fight in this, whereas the Russians, this is what they do, right? This is their thing. And at this time in the war, able to get reinforcements from some other even colder territories, right? Those Siberian regiments and stuff coming down and helping there, and gave a definitely advantage that they had over the Germans in fighting in this, who were said to be very ill-equipped for this climate here. Devastating. Military, civilian. Jeez, is that real footage? That dude was buried. Wow. Just waste everywhere. So they always say, right, like criticism, especially going back to or in these world wars, is the numbers are so high, right, of soldiers that were the soldiers almost just viewed at like numbers, especially by like Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin. People were just numbers. The leaders aren't really humanizing the element here, right? And everyone is just a number on a piece of paper. You're a troop number this, all right? And it lacks that personalization, right? That's the critics, right, of war will often say that, these young men, young women are, just faceless, right? Faceless, and just being used for the greed or the warmongering of the leaders, involved there. Probably referring to that, right? Right. Very cool. All right, so yeah, I mean, talking about some of the more like the themes, I guess, kind of this war. Not necessarily like a lot of details about it, you know, with that, but and it seems like from the songs that I've heard from this band Sabaton, that's kind of what it is. It's like inspired by the songs. You know, some of them are, sorry, inspired by the historical events. A lot are specifically about that event, and they talk about the story of it. And this one, yeah, I mean, they mentioned like the Volga River, right, where Stalingrad is going to be, and runs through kind of the heart of Russia, and that sort of thing. But still, kind of leave the general idea of this large scale war and the incredible amount of death, and you know, likening it to, you know, what do you say, Symphony of the Devil or whatever like that. Definitely is trying to capture like the feeling, I guess, in a way of it. So now we'll go ahead and we're going to jump over to the history video. It's something that really makes this band, I think, really cool, especially for what I'm trying to do on my channel, which is, you know, continue to learn about history and improve my knowledge, and just, you know, become more exposed, and hopefully just becoming a better teacher, of course, and relating to all the great material out there, whatever it is, music, traditional content, whatever. But I love that they do these awesome follow-up kind of history videos, right? And they're fantastic and a great way. I'm glad the two kind of married, you know, together there with the music and the history research and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and check that out, and hopefully we learn some more about Stalingrad, right? Incredible battle. Remember, in some of the estimates that I've come across in my materials and stuff, and what I've studied and come across, casualties can be difficult, but around, what, 2 million, I think, in the casualty department for kind of the forces involved here, with most of those being Russian. If I'm just top of my head, I'm trying to remember if it was about 1.2 million Russian to about 800,000 German. That ends up being pivotal, especially for the Germans, as these were losses that were very difficult, if not impossible, to actually to replace, right? And a turning point, right? Really, it's kind of seen as the turning point for World War II on the Eastern Front, maybe as a whole in Europe. The importance of Stalingrad definitely is big, as it again was a massive turning point of the war. That, although, you know, that because you know, wars of attrition or whatever aren't always indicators of who actually wins. So even if there's more like Russian deaths, doesn't mean that when it comes to the war and the outcome of the war that means that you're losing. Because in fact, this is able to push back the retreat, right, at a lot of costs, of course, but push back the retreat of the Germans and then continue that push. And this was why they consider this a turning point. All right, so Stalingrad, World War II, Sabaton history. Okay, let's check this out.
I'm Indy Nidell.
And this is Hungover Pat, and this is Sabaton history.
Hungover Pat? Is that the guy's name? The band member?
The Battle of Stalingrad was one of the biggest and most important battles in history.
And our lyrics to the song Stalingrad is actually based on a Russian soldier's diary.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Summer 1942, Case Blue. It was to be the decisive German offensive that sealed the defeat and collapse of the Soviet Union.
Yep.
Army Group South would descend the Donetsk corridor towards the city of Stalingrad on the Volga River to protect the northern flank of the forces pushing towards the Caucasus oil fields. Adolf Hitler had, however, made the decision that instead of bypassing the city, Stalingrad itself was an objective and was to be taken by storm. Capturing Stalingrad would, in fact, not only destroy a major industrial hub, but also block Soviet shipping coming up the Volga.
So it's good to put in the economic value for the Russians there, and yeah. So you take Stalingrad. It's defense of the north, while they can go south to the oil fields down below in the sea below, and that makes sense from that purpose. But they're saying, you know, like, would it be worth actually taking the city, or could you bypass it? And Adolf Hitler's decision is to go actually take it, which, of course, is going to be so devastating for them.
August 23rd, 1942, the forces of the German Sixth Army under General Friedrich Paulus entered the city. The Soviet reinforcements being rushed there were greeted from afar by explosions and pillars of smoke, Even the darkest night was illuminated by the incendiary bombs that turned the once beautiful city into an inferno of burning ruins. Still, day and night, the ferries poured men, tanks, and supplies over the Volga to keep the city in Soviet hands. For the men on those ferry boats, there was no going back, for neither the dive-bombing German Stukas above them, nor the merciless and ever-watchful eyes Stalin's commissars of the NKVD gave them any choice. They would push the invaders back, or they would die trying.
Yeah.
Stavka,
No surrender, right? And from what I've heard too, when they do get overrun and are asking to potentially, you know, like retreat or something like that, Hitler was not having that. And of course, this was not something they had really needed, or had experienced before, as having to like retreat. And he was so, you know, confident, maybe overly confident in his armies, that it ends up kind of being a bad decision, because they end up, I believe, surrendering. Anyways, but yeah, they never had to deal with that before. So it's like, no, you fight to the end and you will be victorious. But doesn't really happen.
Red Army Command, had tasked its 62nd Army under Lieutenant General Vasily Chuikov to hold on to the city that Stalin considered the symbolic birthplace of the Bolshevik Revolution, whatever the cost. Stalin's orders were law. We shall never surrender the city of our birth. Let us barricade every street. Let us transform every district, every block, every building into an impregnable fortress.
You know, I think a good leader, a good general, and just people who choreograph those wars, probably got to say you got to take out the emotional element of decisions, of military decisions, and stick to the data, stick to being rational. And if you're doing something because it was this birthplace, right, is that of you know, your people, whatever, or if it's on the opposite side, like with Hitler, it's a symbol of Bolshevism, you know, that shouldn't outweigh the actual strategy and rationale of this, right? That's how bad decisions can be made, is when you do it based on emotion and appeals to emotion rather than actual rational strategy. And it looks, you know, with Stalingrad, it definitely seems that both sides are doing that. No wonder so many people die.
Ironically, in that task, they were helped by the German Luftwaffe, as its massive carpet bombing campaign had turned the city into a maze of ruins and rubble. Every cellar could be turned into a bunker, every collapsed factory into a possible strongpoint. And Chuikov's tactic was hugging the enemy. They would be so close to the Germans that they could not be targeted by artillery.
That's interesting, because they're saying like you know, first wave of Blitzkrieg is using the Luftwaffe, right? It's the aerial attacks, which has always been so successful for them, because it very much softens up the defense and that sort of thing. But yeah, it made it. That's interesting to think of it that way, of it kind of backfiring, and that yeah, it's ruining the terrain, and the fact that it's going to be hard to navigate. And the Russians are definitely going to have the advantage of that by using the ruins again as a fortress. So interesting to see an example of some of the tactics of Blitzkrieg failing.
In the wreckage, men caked in dirt, dust, and blood ran into each other, fighting mercilessly with guns, hand grenades, and bayonets. Small platoons of Soviet submachine gunners swarmed through the ruins, trying to outflank their enemy, while German stormtroops rushed from cover to cover under the stutter of machine guns. Chuikov called it the Stalingrad Academy of Street Fighting.
Street fights, not the traditional open battlefields, right? This is urban warfare there, which can move at a snail's pace, and why this fighting took so long as well.
Soldiers lost track of time and space in the pulverized wasteland. Once a thriving city, where hundreds of thousands of people lived in multi-story buildings. Traps and ambushes were omnipresent. The Germans...
I just see some of these photos of what it was like, and I haven't seen a lot of the pre-war photos of
people lived in multi-story
of the cities and these main squares and stuff. And of course, the photos I've been exposed to and show in class and all this stuff is like what is afterwards, which is just a ruin. Right? Hard to imagine some of these places as the vibrant, peaceful places they might have been.
story buildings. Traps and ambushes were omnipresent. The Germans could, for example, hold the first and third floors of a building, while the Soviets still occupied the second. One mistake, or one step too far into the open, and that was it. Soviet snipers, marksmen and hunters from the Soviet Union's eastern regions lay camouflaged in the rubble, killing Germans with extraordinary precision. Casualty rates among German officers rose to unprecedented levels, as their life expectancy at the front was often just a few hours.
Wow.
It was an extremely draining way of conducting war.
That's awful. You're losing, so it sounds like a lot of their leadership is heading in here and dying, and losing that kind of leadership, of course, can have drastic consequences for the future. So, yikes.
Mentally and physically. No sleep was granted, as every night was illuminated by flares and harassing
How could you
fire.
sleep?
This was not the warfare to which the Germans were accustomed. No open battlefield maneuvers, no blitzkrieg-style advances. Forced to keep their heads down, they called it Rattenkrieg, the war of rats. For the men fighting in the city, this was not about ideology or war aims, but about simple survival. And for the Soviets, survival meant killing as many Germans as possible. But the German Sixth Army did not just consist of Germans, but also Austrians, Italians, Hungarians, Romanians, Croats, and indeed Russians known as Hiwis. They were among the most tenacious fighters, knowing that falling into Soviet hands was, for them, a sentence worse than death. The communist regime had barely even any pity left for its own men, or the women and children still trapped between the two armies. During the final phase of the September battles, the Germans still made progress. The party headquarters of Stalingrad might have fallen on the 26th, but the rest of the city did not. Chuikov's credo that every man had to become a stone of the city was making a difference. For the Germans, attacking the Red Square, the Red October worker settlements, or the Barikadi gun factory was like attacking a fortress of steel and concrete. The main railway station changed sides 15 times in just 5 days.
I was always one of the targets for these wars. And even in the Blitzkrieg itself, among the first phase with the bombers, was trying to soften up the connections and bomb actually railway stations and things like that. And of course, if you can capture it, that's even better. But you can cut off reinforcements if you take that. But what did they say? 15 times it changed possession, which shows how important it was. They say to be able to hold that position.
Hitler was visibly frustrated over the stubborn Soviet resistance and the mounting casualties. General Paulus had promised him many times that the fall of the city was just a few days away. How could the Sixth Army,
what they always say,
one of the largest and strongest, not break the Soviets? The German censors at home tried their best to hide the fact that this was a battle of attrition, that the Germans might actually lose. Nervousness swept through the Fuhrer's headquarters. Throughout October, the fight for the northern industrial sector and the heights of the Mamayev Kurgan continued, but supplies and reserves were running dangerously low. The field hospitals within Stalingrad and on the banks of the Volga were packed with wounded as far as the eye could see. Stalin himself met with the Stavka to discuss the coming Soviet counterstroke, codenamed Operation Uranus. While the city's defenders would continue holding out, the offensive would be directed against the overstretched German lines outside the city, where, far away from the street-to-street fighting, the forces guarding the steppes and along the bends of the River Don fought in the monotony of trench warfare. The Romanian Fourth Army was there, but captured prisoners had revealed to the Soviets they had nearly zero anti-tank weapons. So, while the Germans poured more and more men into the city, Stalin was determined to turn it into a trap. By November, its fate was still uncertain, but the German soldiers began to realize they would have to stay there through the brutal Russian winter.
You don't want to do that.
After Hitler once again broadcast near victory on the radio on the 8th,
Napoleon.
temperatures fell dramatically the following day. On November 19th, Soviet stockpiling came to an end. Over 1 million men had been assembled in the rain and frost. Operation Uranus began.
And these people know how to fight in the winter, like I was saying earlier. They know how to deal with this, right? With this kind of climate where the Germans are going to struggle.
Heavy artillery shells and shrieking Katyusha rockets crashed into the Romanian lines.
Yeah, look at that.
Successfully fighting off the first waves, they eventually broke as the massive T-34 tanks smashed through their lines unchallenged. Paulus, putting his trust in the Führer's calculations, had totally failed to prepare for such a possibility. No mobile tank force was available to prevent the disaster taking place on his flanks.
So yeah, overstretched, and they say that they found out the Germans didn't have anti-tank stuff, anti-tank defenses. So yeah, bring in the Russian tanks and pinch them right there and surround them around Stalingrad, get him behind, and then yeah, that definitely makes sense getting that. But again, this is stuff that the Germans have not experienced before.
The Axis forces outside the city were now threatened from 3 sides. Suddenly, the whole German force on the southern Don front was threatened with being cut off. Pulling back was the only option. On Sunday, November 22nd, the news broke in Hitler's headquarters. Stalingrad surrounded, Russians approaching, Romanians retreating. First,
Don't like
the
that.
encircled German forces perceived this Kessel, as they called it, simply as temporary. Now forced to hold out until they could be relieved, they reversed the roles. True to the rules of the Stalingrad Academy of Street Fighting, they formed a defensive hedgehog, turning their surroundings into defenses. But in December, the Russian winter was tightening its grip around the city, as was the Soviet snare. While many Germans still clung to the promise, hold on, the Führer will get you out, others began to lose faith. The combat fatigue, the malnutrition, the sleeplessness took a heavy toll on the soldiers.
I think people completely underestimate war fatigue. People understand what happens with the deprivation of sleep and food, and now the bitter cold, and the just fear and anxiety that comes from war as a real element that affects the outcomes of things, right? People think of wars as just this pure chess game, and these soldiers are just these inanimate pieces, right? And that's not true. So I can totally understand why this would be settling in with the Germans. Very understandable.
Every tank lost was irreplaceable.
Yeah.
Shells were getting fewer and fewer, and fighting strength deteriorated rapidly, as did all hope of making it out alive. The Sixth Army could not simply be supplied by an air bridge, as there were neither enough planes nor fuel available. And what was supposed to be the saving grace that was Operation Winterstorm by Field Marshal von Manstein was halted 40 miles in front of the Kessel by strong Soviet opposition.
That's it then.
The Symphony of Stalingrad spoke of incoming doom. The NKVD played tango music and propaganda from German communists through the loudspeakers as Katyusha rockets screeched overhead. German rations were cut to a third.
I didn't know that.
They would hold out until 1943. Cases of self-inflicted wounds and desertions increased. Despite the rumors that the Soviets would kill every prisoner, many had just simply had enough. Rations then became so small, soldiers were expected to live and fight off a small slice of black bread a day and whatever they could find.
You can't do that.
Draft animals were slaughtered, dogs skinned, already weakened by starvation.
Oh, those are hooves. Oh, it even says down the bottom right, horse hoof leftovers. So just using all the draft animals. Yikes. Holy cow. It's getting pretty drastic there, getting desperate.
Thousands were hit by disease and frostbite. The overcrowded field hospitals were a gruesome sight of death and open wounds. Those too seriously wounded were just left to die. Huddled together in cellars, shivering in tattered gray overcoats, and with swollen, frozen limbs, the army was disintegrating day by day. There was not a single healthy man left in the Kessel. But Paulus refused to surrender, even as his army was pushed into the smallest corner of the city. Hitler had by now given up on the Sixth Army, ordering Paulus to hold out like the Spartans at Thermopylae and die for Germany's future. According to him, the Sixth Army had fulfilled its historical contribution to the greatest passage in German history.
Just, you have my permission to die. Like the great Spartans of old, you will go down in history. You imagine having the nerve to kind of say that to these people.
The city was to be its grave. Soviet General Rokossovsky had the honor of finishing the job. Soviet tanks, unchallenged by useless anti-tank guns without shells, crushed all resistance under their tracks. Many German officers shot themselves, while others made heroic last stands. January 31st, Soviet soldiers cleared out the last cellars and dugouts with grenades and flamethrowers in the city center.
In the heart of winter.
Before breaking into Paulus's command post. Over 90,000 men were taken captive, the remnants of the mighty Sixth Army. But these were pitiful remnants of men, starved, weak, sick, limping and shuffling towards the snow-clad steppe. Most of them did not survive the marches to the camps, and many were shot along the way. The Soviets proclaimed,
man, these POW camps are just awful. Just awful. Can imagine having to go through those after what you did, but I don't know. It was, yeah, still probably worth it, right? Because remember the fatigue these people have set in. They're just maybe happy to have the idea that they might survive this ordeal.
after Stalingrad, we shall give no quarter. They didn't. With upwards of 2 million casualties, or perhaps more, it was the bloodiest battle of the entire war, and the largest with over 2 million involved at the time of the counteroffensive. It wasn't just a loss for the Axis powers or for Germany. In many ways, it was the loss.
Yeah, that's why people cite it so much as the first major defeat on really all fronts. In kind of the beginning of the slow end for sure, but it looks like they're still kind of holding to that 2 million casualty number that I had been that I had learned, you know, and been divulging, which is just incredible. When they talk about it being highest casualty was World War II. It's probably in world history, right? Insane, huh?
The initiative of the war, after a year of Axis gains, had shifted in the USSR's favor. Germany had lost an entire army, and their European allies, save Finland, had been broken. It is hard to overestimate the significance of the Soviet victory at Stalingrad, one of the major turning points in military history. Alan Brooke, British Chief of Staff, said this: "I felt Russia could never hold. Caucasus was bound to be penetrated. Abadan, our Achilles heel, would be captured with the consequent collapse of the Middle East, India, etc. After Russia's defeat, how are we to handle the German land and air forces liberated? England would again be bombarded, threat of invasion revived, and now we start 1943 under conditions I would never have dared to hope. Russia has held. Egypt, for the present, is safe. There is a hope of clearing North Africa of Germans in the near future."
Like giving hope to this. Yeah, I mean, look at the domino effect that could have been created heading down south. They didn't mention, you know, the what now would have been takeover of oil lands and stuff like that to help fuel these militaries. Could have given a resurgence into maybe another attempted effort at Britain, right? And so it looks like, you know, even early on in this diary that people are, it didn't take much to understand how important Stalingrad was.
The entire war had changed for the Allies, for the whole world, and for the future of mankind, for every one of you watching now. Now, Joachim, you said that the lyrics to Stalingrad were inspired by a Russian soldier's diary.
I want to hear this.
Yes. Was a bit of a mess, actually, that one. I read all the books I could get my hands on. I watched all the movies. I even went through Anthony Beevor's, you know, big pile.
All of his books are big piles.
That's true. And I didn't know where to start, actually.
Okay.
Sitting there trying to come up with the lyrics. There was so much info, but yet there was nothing there that got the juices flowing, I guess.
That really put it down concisely.
No, there's too much. You can't see the forest because of the trees, you know.
Ah, see? Metaphors.
Anyway, I ended up with finding a translation of a Russian soldier's diary. It wasn't complete. It was just a few pages that had been
Okay.
translated and found. And I thought that those were more inspiring than all the books and all the movies I
Yeah,
read.
sure.
I mean, I couldn't have done it without having read all of those books and watched all of those movies.
Yeah.
Because obviously that info can be used when I'm writing the lyrics.
Did
So
you
that's
have a
really-
favorite book or a favorite movie that you would recommend?
On Stalingrad,
Uh-huh.
anything but Anthony Beevor's big book. It's amazing, but it's so boring.
Now, I use Anthony Beaver for the World War II in Real Time channel. I use him as one of my sources, and everything he writes is massive. And there's a trick. Don't tell Anthony Beaver I said this. There's a trick. You read one page and go, that's very interesting, and then you skip 2 pages and read the next page, and you basically get the entire story without having to read the whole thing.
History students, you all know, we all knew, I knew exactly what he's talking about with some of that stuff. You wonder if some of the writers just want to appear, you know, the content might be good, but can you say it in half of the words that you are planning on using? If the answer is yes, then do it. Right? It's steady future writers too, but we can have a laugh about that, I guess.
I just said that on camera, so somebody is going to tell Anthony Beaver. Okay. But listen, Per, you said you were talking about a story about the band in Stalingrad and not just the lyrics in the song.
Yeah. I mean, today the city is not Stalingrad.
No.
It's Volgograd.
Volgograd, yeah.
But we had the opportunity to play in Stalingrad because of the 70 years anniversary of the battle.
Okay.
So there was this promoter who organized an event.
Yeah.
However, some local politician thought that Sabaton was a bad idea. There
Local
are some
politicians,
times,
yeah.
and especially in the old days, there were more controversies around the band.
Okay.
And this local politician had the idea that Sabaton is not coming there to celebrate the 70 years anniversary of Stalingrad.
You'd think just before you finish it, you'd think they would, right? Because I mean, they're well. I mean, if there's specifically if these politicians are worried about the song or that it was not going to make the Russians look good or something like that. I mean, that would be, I guess, understandable. But I mean, look at the song; it wasn't really about like taking sides or anything. It was just describing the dead, and it definitely was criticisms of both sides, actually, from what I remember from the lyrics of the song.
Sabaton is coming there to make a statement and burn the Russian flag on the stage.
He decided that all by himself.
Yeah, we were actually not allowed to enter the country due
Really?
to bans on our passports. I mean, I did write a letter, a response letter to this, which was a public letter which was published in newspapers.
In Russia.
In Russia,
Okay.
yes. Where I stated that Sabaton is a non-political band. We are not there to make a political statement. We are there to perform a show for our fans. We are honored to be part of the 70 years
sure.
anniversary of the Battle of Stalingrad.
Sure.
So the passport ban was lifted.
Okay.
Okay.
But we never were able to do that specific show.
Oh, that's a shame. But you did make it to Arlanda Airport, though.
Yes.
That's the Stockholm airport. So
Here we go.
Here's a
with-
fun little story.
With the stupidest.
It's not
weird
stupid. This is a
story.
great story.
Okay. The band is not allowed to enter Russia,
Right.
but my passport is lifted earlier
Okay.
in order to go to Stalingrad to meet with media
Okay.
and explain the story. At this point, on the behalf of the promoter, I'm in business class flying.
Okay, cool.
There's 2 people in the business class. It's me and it's the Swedish artist Dr. Alban.
Dr. Alban. That's okay.
And
I guess we're not allowed to use a clip of Dr. Alban's music. No, that's a shame.
Hallelujah!
There we go. You and Dr. Alban. That's a weird.
yeah.
Okay.
So we board the plane. We're sitting there like, okay, fair enough. We're gonna go to Russia, and I'm changing plane in Moscow and going to Stalingrad.
All right.
The plane is broken.
Okay. Is it Aeroflot?
It's an Aeroflot flight. and it's
Sorry,
broken.
Russia, but it's broken. it's impossible. It's broken.
Throwing shots at the airline
Okay.
companies, I
Okay,
guess.
so we're on the plane,
Yeah.
and they come to us and they say, "Hey, the plane is broken. You have to leave, and you
Okay.
will get a new flight."
Okay.
So they only take us 2. The rest
Okay.
of the people are sitting still in the plane.
In the broken plane.
In the broken plane. And they take me and Dr. Alban, and we get new flight tickets for the next flight.
Okay.
And then they give us a table at O'Leary's in...
Oh, in Terminal 5?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. You can't miss the O'Leary's in Terminal 5 at Arlanda Airport.
I'm sitting there with Dr. Alban, and he's having a long discussion talking to the Russian promoter because obviously he's playing a show that night
Right. Oh,
in
wow.
Moscow. And he is ensuring that he will arrive, and he wants to play the show late night,
Okay.
even though it's gonna be very late because our flight is gonna leave at like 2 o'clock in the night, and we are
Oh, wow, that late?
Yeah, and we're skipping time, so he's gonna land at 4 or something, and he wants to go on stage very late.
So he's
Wow.
gonna go. Wait. He's gonna go get there at like 4 in the morning. And he wants to go on stage at like 5 in the morning.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he says the show is still on, and he has some kind of argument with the promoter who doesn't believe in this. And
not
at some
surprised.
point, Dr. Alban is making this statement, very loud as he is. I wish the Nazis won World War II, so there would be some kind of... you guys would have some manners.
Oh, jeez. Wish the Nazis had won, so you guys learned some manners. Yikes.
And I'm sitting at the table next to
Yeah.
him and trying to kind of disappear.
Yeah. Because there's a crowd
Leaving
around
the
you guys,
frame.
right?
There's a crowd, it's full packed O'Leary's, and everybody's looking at our table.
Well, Dr. Alban, if you're out there, I really hope that you made that show. Actually,
And thank you for the dinner.
I would see a Dr. Alban show at 5 in the morning. I think that would be really fun. If you do another one, we'll all go, right?
I go.
We're all going. You do another 5 a.m. show, and is it in Moscow?
Yeah.
Who's going to do it?
Yeah.
Okay, we're all going. That's our
Next
promise.
time in Moscow, we're there.
Okay, well, thank you guys for today. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Stalingrad, but we will see you next time on Sabaton History.
So if you subscribe and if you become a patron, you have the chance to get our old Sabaton albums within these comments, talking about the historical background of each song, similar to this video, but in an audio format. Really beautiful,
cool.
really nicely done.
And that's all for today. Thank you very much, and see you soon.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, join, you get some good stuff there. Well, awesome. Man, I love these follow-up videos that they do. Indy Idell, I only kind of roughly had heard of him before this. I know he had done the Great War series, and it's so cool that they linked up where you could just make this such an educational thing, right? And I think that's awesome. Anytime you can educate people on history, get them just interested, right? You hook them, you hook them with the great music, right? And then you can add substance to that. And once you hook them in, then you get fans of history, and hopefully that unfolds to a deeper appreciation of history. And that's so cool that this band has. I'm really happy that this band has been able to find mainstream success with this format. Right, because you think on paper maybe this wouldn't work. I also think, I don't know, do you guys think that them being like a metal band, like the just the stylings of the music really lend itself really well to history, right? I mean, especially because of military history, right? Because you just imagine the passion and speed and the hard-hitting nature of metal and how that can reflect battles and stuff like that. It makes that, and could be very triumphant and patriotic and that sort of thing. Because you wonder, could you do that, with slow jams or something, So it's great that kind of marriage has kind of taken place between the history and the music to reach a large audience. And I get a lot of comments from people all over the world that are coming to my channel based off of Sabaton, this link between the metal and then the history, and that it I've heard people that have talked to me about it, that this got them into history, and I just think that's such a cool thing. It's such a service. I mean, I'm glad these guys are finding success, And I hope they can keep doing that, because that's very cool. And and they were saying how they're not like a political ban, and that makes it obviously a much safer choice, as they're trying to refrain from a lot of political or moral statements about or controversial moral statements or something like that. So it makes it friendlier for a lot of different audiences, you know what I mean? So that's great that they're doing that. But that was great. With the second video here, learning more about some of the intricacies of Stalingrad, that was great, and some of the things that had happened. I'd known, definitely the generals and the major general outcome of it, and causes and effects, but it was good to see a little bit more detail even added on to that. All right, everybody, I think we're going to go ahead and end it here. Thanks for staying with me here with a lot of content. Original videos will be down below, so check those out. Love for you to be a subscriber here, so you can continue on with me in my journey here for historical knowledge here. Thanks to everybody giving me video requests. You can always keep those up. You can put them in comments, but the best place actually to connect with me for those kind of things is actually through our Discord account. If you have not joined our Discord server, there will be a link down below where you can join that. If you are, wanting to give video suggestions, I have a channel specifically for that, so they can be more easily stored, and that would be awesome to have you a part of our large community that's continuing to grow. Thanks for everyone supporting the channel. Thanks to donations through Patreon. If you join that, that is a way that you can directly support the channel. Patrons also, regardless of their pledge level, get to participate in polls to get videos kind of highlighted on this channel. So that's a way you can have more influence about what comes on here. But thanks to everyone that has donated through Streamlabs, through Super Chats, through live premieres. It's really meant a lot. But thank you to anyone that has been watching. Thank you for the likes, the subscribes, and hopefully just an increased passion for history. All right, with that, we'll end it here. Take care. Goodbye.